Good morning. My name is Kevin Riley. I'm a commissioned pastor up at Mount Baker Presbyterian Church in Concrete, Washington. I serve there along with my wife. We have a pretty unique ministry as we host a medically assisted drug treatment inside of our building, and we do a majority of opioid outreach into the community, and we are actively changing how that community deals with addiction and homelessness. But before I really get going, I'm a little bit nervous. Like, I get to go preach places and I get to go share things that we're doing. And one of the things that has helped me get over my fear of standing up here in front of all of you all is asking you guys to stand up. Can you all stand with me? Okay. I know we just sang it, but I'm wondering if we can sing the doxology together again, because there is something so beautiful about that song when we all sing it in unison, talking about the praises of God and enjoying them together. So. That was amazing. You may be seated. So like I said, thank you for that. That was absolutely beautiful. Like, I wish I could bottle that and take that places with me. Like I said, my name is Kevin Riley. I'm a commissioned pastor, and I serve alongside my wife up in Mount Baker Presbyterian in Concrete, Washington. And I have a unique journey into the realm of ministry. See, I don't come to ministry in the normal way. I'm formerly incarcerated, formerly addicted, formerly homeless, and formerly full of a brokenness so big that you couldn't fill it with anything until I found Jesus. Having that relationship with Jesus has changed everything. And it's crazy that you'll hear people say that they met Jesus in the midst of some kind of brokenness or tragedy or something or other, and then their life got better. Well, when I met Jesus in the middle of my tragedy, my life got worse. See, when my wife and I were strung out and using on the streets in Skagit Valley in Whatcom County, we were living in the cab of a pickup truck, 74 Chevy, with 3 dogs. And we basically made our journey from Skagit Valley up into Whatcom County, so, Mount Vernon to Bellingham, Bellingham back to Mount Vernon, and that's how we went. We basically lived in rest areas, the Custer rest area, the Arlington rest area. Those were our homes. And it's in the midst of all of this that one day we had run out of gas and we got a hold of a St. Vincent de Paul Catholic Charity, and they agreed to give us a gas voucher so we could leave Bellingham and get back to Skagit Valley. And as we went in, we went to this church in Fairhaven, and as we were meeting with the church secretary, waiting for a representative from the charities to come and meet with us and give us our gas voucher, I saw this little whiteboard in the breezeway or the annex or the Northex or whatever you want to call it. And on it, it said, on this little whiteboard, it said JER 2911. I didn't think anything of it. I wrote down this thing because I was like, hey, cool. I was high, right? And so it's like, hey, cool, here's this secret code that I need to decipher. I need to figure out what it is. So I wrote it down on this piece of paper, and we got our gas voucher. We went to the gas station, we got our gas, and we drove along, and a day or so goes by, and I'm telling my wife about it. I'm like, hey, I wrote this thing down, and as we're talking about it, I couldn't find the piece of paper. A gust of wind came through the truck, and the paper landed right in between us, and on it said JER 2911. I went, oh crap, there it is, thinking nothing of it. And she looks at me, and her eyes are about the size of dinner plates. And she goes, we need to figure out what this means. I'm like, do you have any idea? And she goes, is it from Jeremiah? I don't know. Is there even a Jeremiah in the Bible? She goes, I don't know. Like, well, we got to figure it out. 2 days later, we're at a Christian bookstore in Burlington, Washington. For some reason, I wanted some kind of good news, something to feel good about my life and the suffering where I was at. And as we're there perusing these bookshelves, my wife Danielle walks up and hands me this book, and it says, "For I know the plans I have for you," Jeremiah 29:11. This is the first time I ever had a real, true interaction with God, for 2 reasons. The first reason was, prior to that, I had a very deliberate conversation with God about how I didn't want to be here anymore. I was ready to go. I was done. My life was nothing more than homelessness and addiction and constant survival, and I was just done. The second thing about that, God answered that first conversation by saying, "For I know the plans I have for you," because 2911, that's the last 4 of my social security number. So God took something that was given to me by this world and used it as a way to communicate with me and tell me that my life was meant for more than that. Right? So I want to talk to you today about dreaming and dreaming with God, because when we invite God into our dreams for our future, our whole relationship and dynamic with Him changes. When we dream with God, it does not mean that our life is going to get better right away. Oftentimes it'll get worse. Because it's all throughout Scripture that, because we are followers of God, that we are bound for more suffering. And dreaming and visioning with God is something that is real, and as in, I had a big word in my brain there, sorry. Dreaming and visioning with God is something that has been in place in the Bible since the book of Genesis. So it began with Abraham in Genesis 15, when God used a vision to reinstate His covenant with Abraham, reminding Abraham that he would have a son and father many nations. In Genesis 28, God dreamed with Jacob, and He said, Jacob, with his mother's help, stole Esau's firstborn inheritance. Jacob then fled Esau's anger, and on his journey, he had his famous dream of a ladder reaching to heaven on which angels ascended and descended. In this dream, Jacob received God's promise that Abraham's blessings would be carried on through him. And there's Joseph in Genesis 37. Joseph is one of the most famous dreamers and interpreters in the Bible. His first recorded dreams are found in Genesis 37. They showed through easily deciphered symbols that Joseph's family would one day bow to him in respect. His brothers didn't appreciate the dream, and in their hatred sold Joseph into slavery. Eventually, Joseph did end up in prison in Egypt. God deliberately dreamed with Joseph, and it ended him up in prison. In Genesis 41, Pharaoh himself had a dream in which Joseph interpreted God's purpose was to raise Joseph to second in command over Egypt and to save the Egyptians and the Israelites from a horrible famine. It's crazy how somebody can be sold into slavery by their own family after a deliberate vision with God, and then come back around and be a savior of sorts. And Samuel had his first vision as a young boy. God told him that judgment was coming upon the sons of Samuel's mentor, Eli. Young Samuel was faithful to relay the information, and God continued to speak to Samuel through the rest of his life. And there's Daniel. As He had done for Joseph, God placed Daniel in a position of power and influence by allowing him to interpret a ruler's dream. This is consistent with God's propensity to use miracles to identify His messengers. Daniel himself had many dreams and visions, mostly related to the future kingdoms of the world and Israel, nation in Israel. Being a commissioned pastor with no big brain school training, I got my GED when I was 16 in 1995, and that's as far as I've gone in education. But somehow I'm able to dream with God and still become a pastor in the PCUSA. How crazy is that? The thing that leads me in all of this is constantly seeking wisdom. Like what you have with Solomon here today, when he says, when God basically gives Solomon anything he wants and he chooses wisdom. I'm so scared of doing something wrong that I'll lead the people in the wrong way, that I'm continually asking God for a little wisdom on how to do things differently and better, and how much I can learn from the people rather than what they can learn from me. And I brought a couple of videos with me today. We're going to look at the first one here in just a second that helps articulate our story and what we're really doing in concrete. It's with a little help from the Presbyterian Mission Agency. I'll let it speak for itself. John, can we please? Before I got clean and sober, I found myself here at this church, and a couple of the deacons cared for me in ways that no church had ever cared for me before. And not only did they put a cot out underneath these windows here, but they even ran power from outside of the sanctuary so I could have heat to my heating pad and stay warm.
It was really chaotic, I think, and it was really hopeless feeling. I don't think we ever got to the point of feeling suicidal, but I wouldn't have minded if my life ended. Kevin told me he'd said a prayer and asked for God to somehow remove me from our situation because we weren't doing well. And I got arrested that day and revoked on my house arrest and spent 3 months in jail pregnant with my first son. That's where my transformation happened. I was praying to God to change everything because I didn't know how to do it.
It took me about a good month after her being incarcerated for me to really decide that I needed to get clean. And I found myself behind this little church in Burlington, and up on the hill was a cross. It's the cross on Burlington Hill. I didn't know anything about God, religion, or anything like that. I just knew from growing up with my grandmother, who was a devout Catholic, that the cross symbolized some sort of refuge. Being there in that place, there would be a train that would come by, and the way my addicted brain worked at the time was that was the sound of God's trumpet coming to scare all the evil away that I had done and to reclaim me as his own.
I went to the Bible study in the jail, and the women at the time that were putting it on were from Tierra Nueva, which is the pastors of Tierra Nueva are ordained in Northwest Coast Presbytery. And we made that our home church and our community when I got out of jail. This church here was without a pastor, and Kevin had expressed to Bob Ekblad that he really wanted to get training to be a pastor. So
Danielle and I came out here and we did a sermon together. It was about 5 minutes long, and it was one of the most mortifying experiences I've ever experienced.
But his heart and the message that he brought, just in those little 5 minutes, we were like, he really, really, really is moving with the Spirit. He had such a heart for doing it. So he trained to become a commissioned lay pastor. You know, having pastors that have been out of seminary, they've never experienced homelessness and drug addiction and those things. And so a lot of the scriptures that we've heard over and over and over all of a sudden had a new light to them because they were told from a different viewpoint.
After I was ordained and installed, and I asked them all, I said, "What is the plan for your church?" One of the ladies looked at me and said, "Well, that's why we hired you." And that's when I cast the vision for this place of cleaning ourselves up from the inside out and then increasing our footprint in the community. We were approached by the county to do a pilot program for a 4-week cold weather shelter for homeless individuals here. We did a public information meeting where the church sanctuary was just packed. And that whole process, while necessary, there's a lot of pieces of it that were just horrible.
We've been hated for a lot of things before, and if we're going to be hated now or criticized now for helping people, I'm okay with that.
And there was an opportunity to join a group of partners to apply for a federal grant to bring medically assisted drug treatment to rural areas. We invited these grant partners in to explain the process to the session, and they all said yes. It's not one little church that's going rogue. It's a whole group of partners that are trying to do something different than just trying to arrest our way out of something. We're actively out here treating it like a public health crisis, because that's what it is. When we first started, before we became a Matthew 25 church, no, we were not a vital congregation. But as we started to grow and more people started to come and more children started to come, we started becoming more vital in our own right. And then as we started engaging in the community, our vitality spread into the streets of this town. In Matthew 25, Jesus is very deliberate in who he wants the community to engage with. He wants us to care for the sick and the broken. He wants us to visit those who are in prison, and he wants us to see them. And the addiction and the poverty that we encounter is a lot like what it was like not only when we were living in addiction, but how I grew up. And so it's strange to be stepping back into something that I escaped, trying to help others escape as well. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, I see all the imperfections that have been told to me my entire life. And then sometimes when I look in the mirror, I see one who's truly beloved. I have to believe that I am beloved, and more than any label that I've ever been given my entire life. Every one of us is broken, and we all need Jesus. Some of us just manifest our brokenness in different ways. Just because somebody's homeless and addicted doesn't mean they're more broken than you are. The brokenness just shows differently.
We believe the addiction's a disease of loneliness, and that people really just need community to heal from something like that.
Yeah.
It's a symptom of trauma. Nobody is beyond resurrection. If it can happen to us, it can be anybody.
Yeah. If I hadn't, thank you. Thank you. If I hadn't said yes to God in the midst of my suffering, none of this would be possible. If I wasn't taking the time to dream with God, none of this would be possible. In the New Testament,
이거 입에 맞을는지 모르겠다.
God is
차린 게 별로 없어갖고. 자.
What are you saying, God? No, I'm kidding. In Luke chapter 1, God used a vision to tell Zacharias, an old priest, that he would soon have an important son. Not long after, Zacharias and his wife Elizabeth had John the Baptist. And Joseph, imagine, Joseph in Matthew. Joseph would have divorced Mary when he found out she was pregnant, but God sent an angel to him in a dream, convincing him that the pregnancy was of God. Joseph went ahead with the marriage, and after Jesus was born, God sent 2 more dreams to tell Joseph to take his family into Egypt so Herod could not kill Jesus, and another to tell him Herod was dead and that he could return home. Imagine if Joseph said no to those dreams, where we would be today. And then one of my most favorite, absolute favorite, it's one of the smallest interactions in the Bible. It would have taken nothing less than a vision from God to convince Ananias, a Christian in Damascus, to visit Paul, the persecutor of Christians. But because Ananias was obedient to God's leading, Paul regained his sight and found the truth about those he was trying to kill. See, I have my own Ananias story. I have a friend that used to arrest me. And I'll let Tom tell the story. Can we show the second video? Tom Wenzel was a Mount Vernon police officer. My first interaction with him was I was pinned to the parking lot of Safeway in Mount Vernon because I was being accused of stealing some food from Safeway. He arrested me that day. Fast forward a couple weeks later, he arrests Danielle. So we did not have good interactions with Tom at all. And after we got clean and sober, I was doing some out-of-custody work crew jail alternatives. So instead of spending time in jail, I was working for the city of Mount Vernon on this work crew. And Tom decided to retire from becoming a police officer and took over that work crew. And then I remember walking to work crew his first day, and just praying incessantly, like, God, just help me get through this. And when he opened up the door, he didn't even recognize me because I was clean and I was sober, and we sat down and we started having a conversation, and I told him about my journey. And then he made me the lead of that work crew, and about 2 weeks in, he goes, this is a jail sentence and I have the ability to give you good time. How'd you like tomorrow to be your last day? And I'm like, I would love that. He's like, cool, man, tomorrow's your last day, you don't have to come back.
And so then we just kind of kept staying in touch. Kevin at that point was really strong in his faith, and he talked to me about God a lot, and I said, yeah, Kevin, okay. And it was always a really neat relationship with him on that, because he never shoved it down my throat. He just kept saying, God is good, and good things are happening. That's God. Yeah, Kevin, I've kind of always done the right thing, and I kind of believe in karma. That was my go-to.
When we were getting ready to do the public information meeting for the homeless shelter, I called Tom and I was like, I'm going and doing this by myself in front of all these angry people, and I could use some support. And he came. And then he started coming to the church. Then he did a sermon with me on forgiveness and reconciliation. And then he met a girl. And then that girl started tilling the soil and watering the seeds of Jesus that I had planted. And after us just loosely staying in conversation, he asked to take me out to breakfast one day, and I said sure, and went and met him for breakfast. And he was telling me all about how he's going to marry this girl that he'd met. And he goes, but I've decided to give my life over to Jesus, and I want to get baptized the day before my wedding, and I want you to baptize me.
And all of a sudden, everything just fell into place for me. From Kevin having originally planted the seed, to my wife cultivating it and making it real. So there I was. Guess what? God's real. Who'd have thunk it? 60 years, almost to the day, and all of a sudden, it's real.
It was a beautiful day on the river. And Danielle and I had learned our lessons from a previous baptism that we needed to have him sit down first before we dunked him. We learned that the hard way.
My cousin is a tall drink of water.
Yeah, but we baptized him that day, and he just came up out of the water sobbing. It was amazing.
Yeah. And all I remember from that was Kevin talking to me, and he lowered me into the water, and there was just absolute peace and calm. And then I felt them trying to pull me back up, and I was like, I'm not ready yet. I'm liking this. Just now they jerked me out of the water. And so to think back from 15 years ago, whatever it was, in the middle of the night in a parking lot with two people strung out on drugs, living in a truck, and me arresting them, to them probably being my best friends. It's just absolutely amazing. It's come full circle like that.
Like, that's been the whole journey for us, is God repairing and restoring all of the broken relationships and all the broken pieces of us. And I mean, it's still a process, but that was just one more evidence of his power in our story. Nobody is beyond resurrection.
Tom's daughter now works with us at the church. She is a person in recovery. She's a recovery specialist. She's kind of like the frontline outreach individual into our community. You saw her in one of the other videos with Danielle. But here's the thing, okay? Through this process of dreaming with God and saying yes, most importantly saying yes to God, our lives, while they didn't change right away, over the course of several years, have completely changed into something that I thought I would never see. We just bought a house. Never thought that would be possible. Our criminal records are gone. We got all of those vacated. All of our court fines, we don't have any of those. Now, we give the same hope for resurrection to people suffering in our community. Right now, we have a cold weather shelter happening in the building. that when the weather first started to turn, that we quickly partnered with Skagit County and put together. We're averaging 5 or 6 a night. This building that we have now has a shower, and we're able to give everybody showers. We're working with another local nonprofit and the county to get laundry put into this building so we can schedule people to come in and do their laundry and take showers and get directly connected to services, whether it's substance use, mental health, housing assistance, any of that stuff. But none of this would have happened if I didn't boldly and unapologetically go dream with God. And so here's my question for you. How is it that you're dreaming with God today? Are you dreaming with him in a way like you just met a new spouse, a new lover, and you're dreaming about your future and you're planning for the future? Are you dreaming with him in that way? Or what about the way you dream for a newborn baby that comes into this world and you dream about their future? Are you partnering with him in that way? Because I'm telling you, he wants to partner with you in that way. And when you partner with him in that way, it changes the dynamic of the relationship. Because up until I dreamed with God, I always thought God was mad at me, or that I had to live a certain way, or I had to be a certain something to earn his love. But it's already been earned through his grace. And that is possible for you. And so my hope for you after today is you can look at and see what God did with somebody that didn't even know him. And regardless if you're 8 months or 88 years old, you can still dream with God for the future of tomorrow. And if only one thing comes from today, I hope that that comes through. Let us pray.